So in this video I thought it'd be kind of interesting to take a quick look at the design evolution of some modern controllers, and more specifically taking a look at the Sega and Microsoft products. And in my opinion, those controllers share a very strong family resemblance from one generation to the next. And to me it's kind of interesting to see how they've taken features from the previous generation and taken them onto the next generation, and then added some features as well on top of it to improve the overall design. So what I'll be doing is I'll be taking a look at the Master System controller and seeing how we've gone from there all the way up to the current generation 360 controller. So lots of people talk about the similarities between the Dreamcast controller and the 360 controller here, and to be fair, they do share a lot of design characteristics with one another. Obviously they've got a similar colour scheme, they've got a very similar button layout. The Dreamcast doesn't have the extra analog stick, but they are very similar all the same. They've got a similar shape, and they actually feel quite similar as well. If you've ever played with a Dreamcast controller, you'll know that they're quite similar in feel to the 360 controller. But to me there's something missing in between. There's a kind of a missing link between the 360 and the Dreamcast. And there's also what came before the Dreamcast as well. So what I'm going to do is take a quick look at how we've gone from one generation to the next, and what features have been added and taken away. So to start off, we'll take a look at the Master System and the Mega Drive controller, or Genesis controller depending on where you live. And looking at the Master System controller here, you can see it's really basic. It's really only a box with some buttons on it. And you've got your number 1, number 2 and start. Start is the same button as number 1. And you've also got your control pad here. And the control pad on the Master System is a floating control pad. It's basically all one piece, and it just rocks backwards and forwards like that. So moving on to the Mega Drive controller, you can see they've improved it quite a lot. They've improved the overall shape of it. It's much nicer to hold. You've got these kind of scoops in the bottom here where you hold on to. You've also got an extra button now, and you've got a separate button for start as well. And again you've got the D-pad, which is a kind of floating D-pad. It's all one piece and it rocks backwards and forwards. So next up we've got the Sega Saturn, and this is the controller for that console here. This is actually the Mark II version of that controller. The Mark I version was just a wee bit chunkier, but overall it was the same kind of design. So first thing you'll notice here, we've now got 6 buttons instead of just the 3 from the Mega Drive. You've also got the start button has been moved to the centre. The D-pad is pretty much identical, it's still the floating D-pad design there, and we've also now got some shoulder buttons as well. The grip on the controller underneath has also changed slightly, so these are a bit more pronounced, a wee bit more substantial to hold on to. But overall, not really a huge leap forward in overall design, only really a few extra buttons have been added. So moving on to the third revision of the Sega Saturn controller, we've now got the 3D controller, and you'll notice some big changes with the design here. You've got the addition of an analog stick here. The controller's a lot larger. It's now got proper handles on the bottom, and it's gone from having these kind of shoulder buttons to having actual triggers now. You've still got the floating D-pad, you've got the start button in the centre, you've got the 6 buttons still, but overall it's a lot larger, and you've now got this kind of circular shape design to it. The other interesting thing about the 3D controller is this here, and it's an expansion bay that Sega fitted to the controller but never actually got around to using or making any peripherals for, as far as I'm aware. I think it was because it was released late in the console's life, so they never got around to releasing any peripherals for it. But that's kind of interesting to see. You can see where they were heading with the design of that there. So now we're up to the Dreamcast, and you can see the similarities between that and the Saturn's 3D controller. You can definitely see where they were headed with the design of this. So you've got similar button layout, you've got only 4 buttons on the Dreamcast, but other than that it's pretty much identical. You've got your D-pad here. It's a floating D-pad on the Dreamcast as well, it's just a slightly different design. You've got your analog sticks, and you've still got your triggers as well. But what they've done with the Dreamcast is they've made it a lot more comfortable to hold, and they've kind of moulded everything so it fits nicer in the hand. You can see they've kind of kept this kind of circular idea as well. They've kind of crossed that over onto the Dreamcast. And now, where we had the expansion port before on the Saturn, we now have two proper expansion ports on the Dreamcast, and those are for your VMU and your rumble pack or your microphone. So next up we've got the original Xbox controller, and this is kind of what I consider to be the missing link between the Dreamcast and the 360. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. The main one is the expansion ports that are on the controllers themselves. You can see the Dreamcast had two, as did the original Xbox. And those were used for a couple of different things. With the Dreamcast, they were used for your memory unit. So you just plug that in there, like so. Or it could be used for a rumble pack to give you rumble in-game, or a microphone like this thing here, and that's for using for playing online or games that supported the microphone. So with the original Xbox you had a similar setup where you could plug in your memory card into the controller, or for playing online you also had a microphone as well, like this. So those were similar to the Dreamcast, but the Xbox had the added advantage of having a built-in rumble feature. So other than the expansion ports, the Xbox also shared some other design characteristics with the Dreamcast controller, and the main one being the button layout. So the button layout is very similar in the fact you've got your analog stick here, your D-pad, which again is a floating D-pad. You've got your 4 coloured buttons here, and you've also got your triggers on the underside as well. And those were kind of moulded quite similar to the Dreamcast. You can see that it's quite a large controller, and it is again similar to hold and play. But in addition to the Dreamcast, the Xbox controller also had a back button, and it had 2 new buttons here as well. It had a black and a white button, and most importantly we now have a second analog stick here, which you now get on basically all modern controllers. You've got 2 analog sticks, but overall very similar controllers, I think. You've got this kind of big window thing here, which is kind of pointless, but it does seem kind of similar to the window that you've got on the Dreamcast controller there. And a lot of people didn't really like the large size of the Xbox controller, so that was addressed in an updated revision, which I'll just show you in a minute. So here we've got the revised version of the original Xbox controller, and really all they did was shrink it down and make it a bit more compact. They changed the button layout slightly, so now you've got your white and your black button here, you've got your back and your start here. But other than that, it's really just a smaller version of the original. It's a wee bit more comfortable to hold, but yeah, really just the same, slightly smaller in size. And finally we're up to the current Xbox 360 controller, and you can definitely see the similarities between the previous generation and the current generation here. You've got almost identical button layout, so you've got your dual analog sticks, you've got your floating D-pads, you've also got near enough identical buttons, and you've also got your triggers on the back as well. But the 360 has some additions, so you've now got a guide button, you've got your LEDs as well to tell you what player you are, you've got your back and your start button, they're still there but they've been moved up to the centre. And unlike the original Xbox where you've got your black and your white buttons, you've now got some bumper buttons or shoulder buttons here. And obviously we now don't have a wire because the controller is wireless. We've now got a battery pack instead of an expansion pack. We do have an expansion bay here for charging the controller and also syncing it with the console, and we still retain the use of a microphone as well. So that was my quick overview of the design evolution of how we've gone from this to this, and I think it'll be really interesting to see where they take it from here and what kind of designs and features we get in future generations of console and controller. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again soon.